Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to an all-new episode of All Elite Arcade, your stop for video gaming news and video game discussions right here at aewgames and All Elite Wrestling. It's me, Evil Uno, with my good friend, the Chugs. How you doing, Chugs?
Hello, everybody. I'm doing great. How are you, Una?
I'm doing pretty good. I can't complain. It's been a week of video games, and it, like every other week, it seems like I've been playing quite a few. But if we can, I would love to start with what you're actively playing right now.
Yeah, so currently I am consumed by the Rising Tide, which is the Final Fantasy 16 DLC. Again, I've gone on record to say this. For a long time, Final Fantasy has been one of my favorite franchises, probably of all time. And Final Fantasy 16 has become easily one of my favorite Final Fantasy games ever made. So the fact that the Rising Tide recently released, which is a story-driven DLC, has me very, very excited. Again, I'm only about, 2 or 3 hours into this DLC, but it has been incredible. The character development, the music, the combat, everything about FF16 is so fascinating to me. So very much I'm enjoying the FF16 DLC, The Rising Tide. That's what I've really been enjoying.
So I'm already on one of our episodes kind of poo-pooed on FF16 and how I dropped off. Not that it was a bad game, but I just, after maybe 15 hours, I wasn't getting what I wanted from it. But what I did enjoy was like the more adult themes and a lot of like the story. Is this something that's slotted in the middle of the game, or is this post the main storyline?
So this is taking place before the crescendo, if you will,
okay,
of the finale of Final Fantasy 16. So without going into too much detail, just in case for spoilers for anyone who wants to enjoy this game, this is definitely not taking place after the main story of FF16. Instead, what I believe is happening is we are just getting a deeper understanding of these characters that so many people have fallen in love with. Again, I'd say the four main characters in FF16 are Clive, Joshua, Torgal, and Jill. Mm-hmm. They are our four-person group who just kind of rules the world in FF16, and it's just more of that within this DLC. But it does take place, once again, right before the ending of the game.
Okay.
But it's unbelievable.
So you have to be pretty deep into this game if you want to play the DLC for sure.
I believe so.
Okay.
So again, because I already beat the game and then I jumped into a point right away where I was able to jump into the DLC. I don't think you can do the Rising Tide unless you are very far into the game. I could be wrong, but to me it feels like something that you play right before you do the final mission.
You at least have to know about the characters if you're going to be jumping, I guess, that late into the story with them for sure.
Yes. Okay. I think certainly. So again, just like with the entire game and with this DLC as well, it just super respects the characters within this game and within this world. And it's been such a joy to play, even for this little bit that I have. I think my favorite thing about Final Fantasy 16, well, not my favorite thing, but one of my favorite things, is there is such a respect and attention done to the summons within the Final Fantasy world, which in FF16 they call icons instead of summons. But it makes everything feel so special and so interesting. Again, the love story that happens, the relationships that happen within this game, it's been one of my favorites. It's been such a blast.
I remember in the 15 hours I played, I think I saw Leviathan, and I think I might have seen Bahamut, if I remember correctly. But or even Ramu to some extent. So like, and we've spoken about this a little bit in our previous episode where we talked about cutscenes. But a lot of what I wanted from Final Fantasy when I was young was that eventual summon find, when you finally get to see giant monsters and big cinematic pieces. It's just now it feels everything is a cinematic piece. Video games have advanced so much that even just the points that you're playing now feel like big pieces of cinema. But I do remember, I barely remember how far I got into, but I do remember the summons from FF16 when I did play.
And that is the thing to me that has been so fascinating to watch is, again, the cinematic pieces within the world of Final Fantasy 16 has been so fascinating and so incredible. Like, some of the most incredible moments I've ever seen in video games has been within some of these cutscenes in FF16. Like, it's so incredible to watch. It literally feels like some of the greatest movie moments you've ever seen, but within a video game, which is what Final Fantasy 16 is all about. Again, Ben Starr, he is the main voice actor for Clive, the main character in Final Fantasy 16. The emotion he portrays, the character development he portrays, just a wonderful character to watch, as well as the voice actors for Joshua and Jill and everyone else in that universe. It's been awesome.
I mean, Square's also been doing essentially like cinematic pieces for over 20 years. You know, and I don't know if you were there at the generation, but like when they made their first Final Fantasy movie, not Advent Children, the one before. I remember thinking like, oh, this is it. The people who make the best graphics, who make the best stories in video games, finally make movies. Now they make movie games. Their games are just 100-hour pieces of video content, which is insane.
Right.
You've been playing anything else, Chugs?
Yep. So other than the FF16 DLC, I've been sticking with my 5-game cycle, which once again currently is The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, which, by the way, I know I've mentioned this multiple times, but let me tell you, the difference of playing that game from like playing it on Xbox One to playing it on Xbox Series X, smooth 60 frames per second, just a beautiful experience. So I've been playing The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, once again, the FF16 Rising Tide DLC, also playing Dark Souls 2, Scholar of the First Sin, playing Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown, and also Silent Hill 1 on the PlayStation 1, which I stand by this. I'll say this. For anyone who's joined in on my live streams, quite a few jump scares with Silent Hill 1. In the first one.
Really? I've never played it. I've never played it.
Yep. Okay, so I got to tell you this one thing. And hopefully this is okay. And hopefully it's okay for the viewers.
Please.
Because it's not a massive spoiler, but it is, like, I think what I'm so impressed with by the way that the Silent Hill team has approached horror is this, for example. So they play this like foreboding, scary music throughout the entire time that you're playing Silent Hill, specifically when you go into a school area. And then you eventually end up going into this room where they cut the music. There is no music whatsoever. All you hear is this banging on a locker. That's it. It's doo-doo, doo-doo, doo-doo. That's it. And you walk very slowly. You can barely see anything. And then there's this one locker with blood around the locker. And you can see that it's moving. You can see that it's moving. And you're like, oh God, okay, I'm going to open it. You open the locker, nothing. Nothing. All it says is there's nothing inside. Then you walk 3 seconds later to go to leave the room, and some dead body like jumps out of another locker, and it terrified me, dude. Like, again, the decision making and the way they go about doing their jump scares is so brilliant, because I was so convinced something really bad was going to happen, and then it didn't. And I thought, oh, I'm okay. I'm all right. And then 3 seconds later, something else jumps out and scares you. So again, the understanding of what true survival horror is within video games was very understood by the original Silent Hill team. So it's been a joy to play. It's
fun because I haven't played. Only just recently have I even jumped into the second one, which I think people, when they discuss which ones are amongst the greatest games of all time, that is one of them. And and I only played that recently. In some time in the last 2 years.
You have played Silent Hill 2.
I hadn't until 2 years ago, and I did not complete it. But I think I played 10 hours of the game. What I like about revisiting old video games, especially old horror games, is there's limitations to what they can do, and there's limitations to what they can show you, but they still found ways to play with those limitations to scare the crap out of you. Like, the limited tunnel vision in Resident Evil, taking the way the doors are presented, the way the hallways are presented. Video games at that time hadn't figured out camera angles the same way that they would do them now. They're not as cinematic, but being stuck in that format made for horror that is not attainable nowadays unless they were trying to make it, kind of boxy like it used to be. And it's really neat to go back and play those old horror games and see like audio in horror of all kind. You're talking about the pumping heart of that locker. Audio, no matter the system, it could be on NES, when something is made to stress you out based solely on audio, based solely on how it's presented to you or how little it gives you. And so that when they introduce sound, it's terrifying. And it's really cool to go back on those old video games and see that.
It really is. It's so true. Like seeing the way that devs figured out creative ways to scare us or make us feel uneasy is such a joy to watch now. Because again, in 2024, there are a million different ways in multiple entertainment platforms to find ways to scare your audience. Mm-hmm. But there's something, I stand by this. There's something more uneasy or scary about those PlayStation 1 polygon graphics. I don't know what it is, but I swear, the classic Silent Hill 1 Resident Evil graphics are scarier to me, even though they look less realistic as we would look at them today. So, but yeah, like you said, they pay so much attention to sound design or finding ways to terrify us in different ways or creative ways. And I still, in this day and age, can go back and play a classic, unbelievable game like that and go, oh, I understand why this was such a big hit. Because it's so true. That's
the cool part of the medium of video games is that even old stuff has gems because the rule set for video games keeps evolving. And so with that rule set, you can do different things. But, any good thing started from very small limitations. And it's very neat to go back and see the same tropes have stuck around for a reason. But because they worked at one point, they still work today too. We should advise, I don't know if you've done this, you should definitely do a 5-shirt cycle t-shirt, a 5-game cycle t-shirt. Oh, it's part of your vernacular at this point. It's part of your brand.
Right. Because don't get me wrong, there are definitely times where I'll play a game and I go, you know what? We're going to stick with this one for a while.
Final Fantasy was one of them, for sure.
Final Fantasy was one of those games. When the Elden Ring DLC drops, that's going to be one of those. When Silk Song eventually drops, that's going to be one of those. But yeah, fingers crossed.
Yes.
But I love a wide variety of video games. Actually, on my Twitch stream, I do Shirt of the Day. Where I show off a video game shirt that I'm wearing, but I should do a 5-game cycle t-shirt. But just in case, for our visual listeners, this is my shirt of the day today.
Oh, look at that.
Rocking a very cool NES controller t-shirt today. I always make sure that I have a video game t-shirt on, ready to rock and roll, especially for this podcast, for All Elite Arcade. Got to make sure I'm ready to go.
I'll take the knee, and I can accept that I have less video game shirts than you do. It's again. I think every week I see you and you have a different video game shirt. It does make me a little jealous. I'm not nearly as stylish when it comes to that stuff.
I have too many, Uno.
Someday I'll catch up. As far as games I've been playing, I've actually, we've talked about it a whole lot, but I'm still playing Final Fantasy. Rebirth. I'm
so happy.
I'm still very much enjoying it. I'm getting at that part where I'm like, when is it gonna end? It always feels like I'm so close for it to end, but it does not feel like. It still feels like I might have 2 more acts. I just reached a point where every game, all the side mission stuff that I thought were completed, just got a whole new set of levels to them. So Queensblood has new levels, the races have new levels, and so I've been chopping down at those. I've completed Queensblood entirely. The card game I was super addicted to.
Oh, wow. Okay, so Uno,
Yes.
I love FF7 Rebirth.
Mm-hmm.
It literally is one of my favorite games of all time. But I have such little experience with Queensblood.
Really?
So like I really do. Uno, I would be totally honest. I love Queensblood. I love the idea of it, but I was terrible at it when I first started playing it. So I'm so fascinated to know your experience within the Queensblood minigame within FF7 Rebirth.
So I'm a big card game guy in general, and so
yes,
this was a fantastic one. It's like a lane based one for sure.
It's very good.
You accumulate points, and every card has its. I mean, like every card game, every card has its use. But one thing that's very neat, especially since now you're telling me you haven't done this, there's a whole side story attached to Queensblood that's pretty zany. Actually, all the side games have really weird, like, bringing you to multiverse stuff. Like, it's
that is true.
I don't want to reveal the ending of this Queensblood one, but it's a weird one. It's a weird one, and I like my video games weird, and so it's been very neat to see. Me too. There's also some incredible Red 13 content within Queensblood. If you know, he wears an outfit, and it's worth the full investment of your time. So I know
exactly what you're talking about. Yep.
That and him riding Chocobo are the two funniest scenes I think of that video game. Other than that, so I've been chopping away at Final Fantasy 16. Just this week, Sea of Thieves was released on PlayStation. And so it's been out for a few days now on PS5. I put minimal amount of time into it when it came out to Xbox. I played it a little bit with Brandon Cutler, who is an immense Sea of Thieves fan. And I played
Sea of Thieves King.
Yes. He knows everything about it. Him and his wife play it religiously. But, you know, I've only played a little bit at the very beginning of when it came out. And so I haven't seen the grand span of what they've expanded it with over the last 12 seasons. So now it's come out on PlayStation. My crew plays mostly on PlayStation. I've been playing that with them this week, and man, I think by now it's popular and everyone is aware of this game. But that game is an incredible multiplayer game. Like communication is half of the video game. You know, you have to communicate with your other ship members to make sure that the ship's right in the right direction. You got to make sure that you patch up the holes, and you have to take out the water, and you have to there are chests that will set your boat on fire accidentally, so you have to have a person designated to throwing water onto the chest, or you know, when you're on an island, you want to get a point guard that is on the cannon, and you want to try and get the skeletons close to your boat so you can attack it with skeletons. And that's just base stuff. So I've played maybe 6-7 hours this week, and I'm fully engrossed. I don't know if I'm at Fortnite levels where I will spend money on microtransactions, but but I might get there. But I do want to see a lot of the content, because right now it's an incredibly beautiful game. It's super colorful. It's from one of my favorite developers of all time, Rare. They made Donkey Kong. They made Banjo-Kazooie, which is one of my favorite games. I was going to
say Banjo-Kazooie.
One of my favorites of all time. And so it is neat to see them at play. You could hear it in the music and the audio treatment. You could hear it you can see it in the visuals. It's so colorful. It's so vibrant. And there's so much content in it too. There's a whole Pirates of the Caribbean story section that I haven't touched. There's vaults. There's, obviously you got to go dig up treasures. There's battles. There's a whole section based on a point and click game, Adventure of Monkey Island. There's so much content on it. I'm actually very excited to keep moving forward, because it's not even dumb fun, because it is quite challenging, but it is like some of the most fun parts is just when you stop playing the actual game and you just decide, like, I'm going to play the banjo beside my friend, and then that friend brings in their instrument, and now you're just dancing, playing around, or just taking in the scenery, or messing with other people. It's very fun. And so if you are a multiplayer connoisseur, or someone who is looking for a new co-op game for you and your friends, that is one I would advise for sure.
Let me tell you, Uno, I have been meaning to play Sea of Thieves for so long. Maybe at some point through this podcast somehow.
Ooh.
Me and you can show me the ropes.
Yes.
And we can play some Sea of Thieves, because I've been meaning to do it for so long, and it seems right up my alley. And the more you talk about it, the more hyped I get. So who knows? Maybe sometime down the line, we can do a little All Elite Arcade Sea of Thieves episode or something.
Yeah, I'll take you up for that offer, and I bet you Brandon Cutler will be super happy, because he was like, "Oh yeah, if you get back into it, please invite me." He's also a king at this game, so he'll definitely get us some cool stuff for sure.
He would be the captain.
He would. Oh yes, captain. Yeah. I'm purely a sail guy, or look at the map. That's usually my go-to. So I've been playing that, and that's been very neat. And then a good friend of the podcast, a good friend of mine, Dan Reichert of Giant Bomb, suggested a video game called Minishoot Adventures, which is imagine the Zelda game, the way that you pick up new pieces, and it unlocks new dungeons, and you hit switch to unlock paths to another dungeon, and kind of like that map structure, except it's more of a top-down shooter game, more of a space shooter game, kind of the closest thing I could probably compare it to is Binding of Isaac, which is take away all of the religious illustration stuff and a lot of the grotesque stuff.
But the creator of Super Meat Boy, correct? Yeah.
Yes,
the people who made Binding of Isaac. Yes. Legendary indie devs.
Yeah, incredible game. If you have never played that game, that might be in the of all time. I think that's in the top 3 games I've spent the most time into. Because I've gone and restarted it so many times, and it used to be a very good stress game for me. That and Tetris, great games for me to turn my brain off on. So this has been a lot of that. It's a Steam Deck verified. You can play it on PC, and it's not heavy on story. There is a bit of lore, but it's not heavy on lore. You're playing a spaceship going through essentially a Zelda map, but at its core gameplay, it's fun, it's challenging. The bullet hell elements are really neat. The puzzles are mostly combat based, but there are some other puzzles beyond that, and it's been neat to explore. And I was told it's on the shorter end too, so you could probably 100% it within 11 hours. And so if you are interested in that kind of game, it's available on Steam Deck. That's Minishoot Adventures, and I'm maybe 2 hours into it, and I will 100% the game. I think that is.
I'm sure you will.
Yeah. For that short of a time on it, and for the amount of fun I'm having with it, I'll definitely spend the rest of my time beating it for sure.
Yes. No, that sounds super interesting. That sounds right up my alley as well. It's definitely something I want to give a try.
I would say it's definitely something that's good for especially for you and I, who spend a lot of time in airports and in airplanes. Yes. It's a very good game. You could put in 20 minutes and feel like you've actually did a little bit of progress. And a lot of those games aren't always that. It never feels like you're making a step forward. This one does, because there's constant upgrades and persistent upgrades as well.
And don't get me wrong, we both love games that require a ton of time and a ton of attention. Mm-hmm. But I'll tell you, after playing a couple games in a row that takes over 150 hours, it's really nice to play a game that takes me 5 to 10 hours to complete. Then I can move on to the next one.
It's a nice little palate cleanser, and sometimes I want a game to not overstay its welcome. I want more of it later on, and sometimes those are the best experiences.
Right, because not every time, of course, the more time that you have to tell your story, it can be a wonderful story. But it doesn't necessarily mean, the length of your story doesn't necessarily mean that makes it a great story.
Yeah, exactly.
Some of my favorite games have been 5 or 10 hour games. Some of my favorite games have also been 150 or 200 hour games. So it all depends. And like you said, it is nice every now and then to play a nice, short, just well executed video game. For sure.
So that's my suggestion to you out there if you want to find yourself a Steam Deck verified game. We will be right back after this with some news. Right after this. I did it twice. And we're back. Hello. Hi. It's us here at Elden Arcade. We're going to be talking about the weekly news in video games. Yes. It's the first week of May. I can't believe we're this far into the year.
I can't either.
It's crazy. I feel like I play so many games, and in this month alone, this is not even a news cycle piece. I'll mention them anyways. But in this month alone, like we have big games that are about to come out that are I'm gonna be spending so much time on. There's Animal Well, that game that we talked about from the Nintendo Indies, from Video Game Donkey's publisher. There's Hellblade 2 is coming out this month. Did you know that?
Is it
Saga?
This month?
It is, yeah. May 21st it's coming out.
You are kidding me.
Yeah, and I think that's Xbox, unless they announce something on their June 9th presentation that they just announced. That's also a news piece for you.
That's a big release for
That's
Xbox.
a huge release. This is their only first party game of this year as of yet, as far as I know.
Wow.
And then Ubisoft's Call of Duty-esque game X Defiant is this month, and Multiverses, that Warner Brothers fighting video game, is coming back this month after being gone for a little bit, with a list of changes and a ton of new characters. So like we have a big month, and it's also a big month of news. And so I'm gonna get into them, and we can start tackling them. And we're gonna tackle one that we were gonna tackle regardless on our own. This one's another Elden Ring piece
baby.
Of information. This comes from Rock Paper Shotgun and the Souls boss Miyazaki. It is said that no more Elden Ring DLC will be released after Shadow of the Erdtree, which he says this will be the first and last DLC, the one that will be coming out in June, and they have no plans for extra content at all. He says that it is more likely that Elden Ring 2 would be released than another DLC piece.
Yeah. So you know what? What has me excited about that proposition is, to me, it further confirms that the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC is going to be so massive.
Oh, for sure.
Like, because originally, again, this is all rumors, but originally it was discussed, I believe, that the Elden Ring DLC was going to be broken up into 2 parts.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was decided, you know what, let's make it one massive DLC. Again, the rumors from, I've heard everything from it's going to be 10 to 30 hours as far as DLC content goes. I'm so blown away. And again, Miyazaki and From Software, and whether it's Elden Ring, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, what have you, every single DLC, like 99% of the time, that is their absolute best work.
Oh, and yeah.
To me, Elden Ring is one of, if not the greatest video games of all time. Uno, me and you have talked about this. So to think that this DLC is going to be so massive, and they're not even focused, not even thinking about making another DLC, you know it's going to be filled with some of the best boss fights, some of the best areas, some of the best lore. I am so incredibly excited. And actually, I am not sad at the idea of them not making a second DLC, because I do believe the next game is going to be incredible.
From Software produces so many games now that I don't hate the idea of them just releasing one DLC, because I know they probably have another game in the pipeline that, like, they have a pattern on how they make games and how they're structured and how difficult they are, that if you're looking for your fill, you just have to jump to the next From Software game. And I do know, I think they are working on another new IP game as well. So very excited to find out what's coming up next. The DLC looks incredible from what we've seen, which is very, very little. But if it's based on any of the, if we're looking at previous games, like we've talked this before, but the Bloodborne DLC was incredible. The Dark Souls 3 DLC was incredible. So the bar is already set high on DLC. And then Elden Ring's bar to begin with is so high that I can only see it being good. There's no way. I mean, there are chances it's disappointing. Maybe we shouldn't think ourselves so highly. But the bar for From Software is so high, and they are so consistent. I highly doubt this will be bad.
Dude, Uno, I agree with you in the sense of, like, we can't assume, right? But based on previous experience, the Dark Souls 3 DLC was the best part of that game.
Oh, yeah.
And I love Dark Souls 3. Mm-hmm. The Bloodborne DLC, the best part of that game. And I love Bloodborne. There is no way, dude, that the Elden Ring DLC is not going to be incredible. Elden Ring was incredible. There's just no chance, man. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, I'm so excited. And plus, I mean, if they're saying that they're not making another one and they're just going to work on Elden Ring 2, if so, I'm fine with that too. You know, it also, it may finally be time that they make another Bloodborne. I know I keep every time something new is announced from them, I'm like, okay, yeah, but around the corner we're going to get Bloodborne 2, right? That's the whole goal.
Please, we've got to get Bloodborne 2.
Please.
We have to.
Yes.
We have to, please. My fingers and toes. My toes are crossed right now as well. Dude, we need a Bloodborne 2. We need it.
Oh yeah, so that's on top of my list for sure. But you know, we've talked about it every single week, and we probably won't stop. You might as well hold off until June as well. We're gonna talk so much Elden Ring DLC when it comes out, because both of us are so jazzed about it.
Oh, can't wait.
Next story piece. This one is pretty straightforward. The Batman Arkham series is getting a brand new game, except it's a MetaQuest VR exclusive. The game is called Batman Arkham Shadow, and it will launch on MetaQuest 3 later in 2024. And it's, description-wise, it says it will be a lot of gliding through Gotham, traversal, and doing, like, detective work as Batman, which, honestly, some of the best parts of playing those games.
Sounds excellent.
And this is actually by Rocksteady Studios itself. So this is the next game in that series by Rocksteady as well.
Nice. Yeah. That sounds very intriguing.
Mm-hmm.
Again, to me, the Batman games kind of redefined superhero video games in a lot of ways. I think, like, when you look at, like, Arkham Knight or Arkham City or Arkham Asylum, like again, I think a lot of people to this day compare, like, oh, how do we imagine some of our favorite superheroes and then coming to life within the video game world? And you see the Batman games and how successful those were. The idea of a incredible Batman VR game sounds amazing. Now for me personally, I love virtual reality, but I can only play in small spurts.
Yeah.
I can't play for too long. I talked about this last week with Claudio, but this is definitely something I'd be super interested in. Absolutely.
So they made a bite-sized Batman VR game before. They released Batman Arkham VR on PSVR. I also think it might have been released on Steam as well for the Valve Index.
Yeah.
And that's like a very short experience where you get to be Batman. And I enjoyed it, I'll be honest. Like, you know, suiting up, taking out your gadgets, doing a couple of like detective wars pieces. That was something I was super into, and I'm a huge Batman fan. So this seems like a more fleshed out idea of that and a more larger game of that. So it could go either way. We've discussed this, but VR is impressive technology. But it is also still, it's in infancy, and so a lot of people have not purchased a VR headset. And will this be one of those games that sells some? I do not know. Personally, I think Batman is a huge name, but I don't know if that alone will sell a MetaQuest 3. But I can tell you this, from someone who is a MetaQuest 3 owner, I will be getting the Batman Arkham Shadow VR.
Me as well.
Up next, this was there's some more serious ones, but I'd like to mix and match with some less serious news pieces. And this one is a super interesting one. This is from GameSpot. Tetris and 7-Eleven are releasing a handheld gaming device together. That's right. 7-Eleven, your convenience store, is teaming up with Tetris for a range of merchandise, including a handheld video game device called the Slurpee Plus Tetris handheld game device. It will boast a 1.8-inch full color screen with a built-in speaker, and can be powered by AAA batteries or a USB-C cable. It will be priced at $30. This is not the first time a national brand has paired up with a console or a video game before. KFC had a video game console at one time. There is a lot of pretty silly, collaborations between video games and consoles before. This, I don't know what the goal is, honestly, but I love Tetris, and I bet you this will be a heck of a collector's item at some point in time.
Uno, I'm going to be honest. I love Tetris and I love 7-Eleven.
Hey, there you
go. I think I stop at a 7-Eleven probably every other day. Like from where I live, I'm always stopping at 7-Eleven. So
you might be the audience.
If I walk in there, I am the perfect audience. With a game like Tetris, which again, it's iconic. I mean, I literally think up until maybe Minecraft. And Tetris still may be number one, but at one point, Tetris was the number one selling video game ever made.
Yeah,
like across all platforms, and rightfully so. Tetris is a very fun, simplistic, but also challenging game.
In a lot of ways, it initiated the original video game boom as well.
It really did.
Like the reason I think I started playing video games is because my mom would play Tetris. And so she learned of video games, and it passed on from there, right?
There you go. Yeah, right. So the idea of 7-Eleven and Tetris coming together to make some sort of console, I'll tell you what, I'll be first in line.
Why not?
That's for sure. Yeah, that's for sure.
And just because we're talking about this, I'll voice out a few other weird collaborations before. But Halo 3 had a collaboration with Mountain Dew when they made Gamer Fuel Mountain Dew available across all stores. There was an EverQuest 2 pizza at one point. There was obviously this game is kind of known out in the world, but there was Sneak King and Big Bumpin', the two Burger King video games for the Xbox 360. Right. There's been a Destiny cookbook. Cooking based on the world of Destiny. There's been all kinds of stuff, including fashion pieces from all the Final Fantasy games. But
there and also a game like Pepsi Man. Remember the Pepsi Man video game as well?
Actually, 7-Up also had a game. The 7-Up Spot guy had a game on Super Nintendo as well. So oh,
nice.
So branded games is not a brand new thing. Consoles either, because as we mentioned, is the KFC. I don't know if we'll see more, but I am still excited to see what this thing looks like.
Me too. Yeah, same here.
Next piece here we have Helldivers 2. So Helldivers 2 has found success recently. Breaking from the original gaming trends. The microtransactions are very cheap. They still have battle pass. They don't have loot boxes. It has a smaller price point. It does a lot of cooperative stuff like pooled missions that everyone is going for. And so it's been a great success on all fronts. In fact, I believe it is one of the top selling games in the first quarter of this year, in the top 5, if I remember correctly. So it's doing incredible. But just recently, they've actually come under fire because the game was released on PC and on PlayStation. It was an exclusive PS5 console release, and they are now mandating that you sign up for a Sony PlayStation account when you log in to your PC version of Helldivers. And people who have a PC have not been very happy about this, about Helldivers.
Fair enough.
Understandably, you buy it on another platform. You're not anticipating to create a secondary login and to provide your information to Sony. And so they've actually gone and flooded the Steam review pages to try and get the developers to either renounce or change this. And the developer has come out and discussed that they may do that. They may actually change back to what it originally was. And so there is actually been a potential impact from the fan base on this little game, because this game is actually I would assume AAA at this point. It's not a small pool game, but it is not a AAA game or even AA game. It is a fairly small team that is still working on this, and it would seem that they've been actually influenced by the fan feedback to making this change.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I actually play Helldivers 2 on my PlayStation 5. So I personally have no issue with it whatsoever. But I can understand people who are playing Helldivers 2 on their PC, and maybe they don't own any console whatsoever, and they have no association with Xbox or PlayStation or Nintendo or anything like that. So I do understand people being like, hey, maybe I don't want a PlayStation account. For me, it's no problem at all. I love it. But I love PlayStation and I love Helldivers too. But yeah, I mean, I kind of see where the PC game crowd is coming from as far as not wanting to have to go through that process.
It's
So
also it's a practice that's not entirely unknown. Like Sea of Thieves
yes,
just this week, originally a Microsoft video game, came out on PlayStation consoles, and within the PlayStation login, it tells you to create a Microsoft account or connect one if you have
there you
one.
go.
So it is a practice that has been done before, but for
Yes.
once, it would seem that the developers are actually responding to it and may actually be acting upon it as well.
The devs in Helldivers have just been so fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
Through the whole thing. It's. I remember the first, and I'll say this openly. I remember the first week I wanted to play Helldivers 2. I could not access the game. Like I could not get in the game because the queue to get into the game was so massive, and the game like overtook the entire world.
Yeah.
That they weren't prepared for all these people to play. But when you look at the developers communicating with its fan base, the entire time they were saying like, hey, we're so sorry. We're working on this. We're going to make it better. And then 2 days later, it was like everyone had access to the game. So yeah, the devs for Helldivers 2 have gone above and beyond to make sure their player base has been satisfied and been happy, and I think that really shows in the dedication with the fan base.
Yeah, they've been very transparent with a lot of their changes
have.
as well, and they've been the people who are vocal to them they've listened to as well, and so
Yep.
I they've just recently released more content. They released a snow area and more weaponry, and so they're constantly expanding upon this. And because the player base is so large now, I would not be
Huge.
surprised if this is a game that has a pretty long lifespan.
Yep, agreed. I agree. I think Helldivers 2 is going to be successful for a very long time.
I think
Very
so
long
too.
time.
And what happens with these games being so successful is that eventually they'll have partnerships with other brands, and so you'll eventually probably see a skin from another Sony property, or even a big piece, a big meaty piece to try and bring back people to the user base. Our last story for this week, before we get into our big meaty piece for the day, is Nintendo Switch 2. Now, Nintendo Switch 2 has been rumored as there's leaks that have disclosed that it will be likely released later this year. Well, it would seem another leak has come out. New hardware details for the Nintendo Switch 2 have leaked, and they reportedly will feature new updates to their controllers. So a China-based peripheral manufacturer that specializes specifically in Joy-Cons and other Switch-compatible controllers have partnered with Nintendo before on making secondary controllers. And it would seem that they posted an image and specs that said there would be new Joy-Cons that are magnetic. I'm not quite sure how that would work, but instead of actually sliding, they would graph onto your Switch. There is a new cartridge module, which people are assuming means that the old cartridges will not work in Switch 2, although that has not been confirmed. And it would seem that the previous Switch screen had a max capacity of 720p. This one is a much larger screen that goes to full 1080p, docked and undocked. And those seem to be the large things that have been leaked. There is no official word, but rumors are that either it will come out later this year or it will come out in the spring of 2025.
Yeah, honestly, I'm very curious to see kind of where Nintendo goes, because I do love their approach of kind of focusing on their own market and doing their own thing. They have never been concerned with, we want the most powerful 4K 120 FPS console. They want to make their own original, interesting games, but make them in their own unique way. Like, for example, I think we all know this, but the reason, or a big reason, the Switch has been so successful is its accessibility to so many different people. So I feel like with the Switch 2, or I really hope it's called the Super Nintendo Switch. I hope so bad. That's
please.
what they call it.
That would be so much better.
It'd be so perfect, dude, if they called it the Super Nintendo Switch. But the idea of having a 1080p like handheld screen would be super exciting. But again, Nintendo is always going to be so successful based on so many of the IPs that they have, whether it's Metroid, Zelda, Mario, Donkey Kong, what have you. But nonetheless, I'm very excited to see what the new console is, and I will be first in line to be getting a Super Nintendo Switch. That's what I'm going to call it.
I hope
Super
you predict
Nintendo
that
Switch.
properly, because that is, and this is maybe
It's perfect.
based on Wii and Wii U, but I feel like that's a much better branding name than Nintendo Switch 2.
Yes.
I personally think. Nintendo.
I agree.
Nintendo's a weird one because they definitely invest in a lot of their first party, and they invest in only themselves in a way that is actually, I actually think it's pretty cool. They're very committed to their projects. They're very committed to their characters. Their characters have defined rules. You often hear about when people want to use Mario in their situation or in other games, about how they have very strict rules about Mario, about Peach. Like Peach, for example, cannot die, and so on. But Nintendo is also ones that usually move forward in new innovations. The handheld revolution kind of started with the Switch, and they attempted it previously. The Wii with the motion controlling, even the Labo, which did not become gigantic, but the idea of like providing the means to program your own video games and using cardboard to create robots and stuff. That's stuff that no other console maker would ever dare try. But Nintendo is one of those companies that has so much money saved from their years and years of lucrative business that they can make these attempts at new things, and they can make these attempts at expanding on the medium of video games, and they will be rewarded even if they won't financially make their monies on it. And the thing is, though, Nintendo, one of the strongest video game brands of all time, if not they'll do fine. Nintendo Switch 2 will do fine. It's a guarantee.
But, and also though too, is when you look back at the video game crash of 1983 with the Atari 2600, the Intellivision, the ColecoVision, and kind of the video game industry as a whole, at least within North America, kind of fell apart. And a big reason that the video game industry came back is when Nintendo created the Nintendo Entertainment System, or the Famicom. They were so cautious and so careful to where every single piece of software that was produced on their console had to go through Nintendo. So there was like this massive love and care and attention to every single game that was ever released on their console, which in turn, again, has created this incredible standard within not only Nintendo, but the video game industry now, where people are so careful about what type of games they release. So yeah, Nintendo has so much of this figured out, and I'm super excited to see what the next console is going to be, for sure.
We'll be talking a little more about Nintendo very, very shortly, because we'll be talking about video game preservation, including the unfortunate takedown of Wii U and the 3DS market, right after this. And we're back. Hey, we're back. We're going to be talking about video game preservation and why it's so important. And you're probably wondering, well, what's the point? Why would we talk about this? Well, it would seem that currently there's a huge class action lawsuit involving Ubisoft and the video game The Crew. Are you familiar with The Crew?
I've heard of The Crew, but I've not played The Crew.
So The Crew is a open world racing game, but it covered essentially the span of America. You could drive from city to city in like a very small summary of what America would be. That is actually not the point of this thing. It's that as recently as 2017, it was reported that there was over 12 million active users who would regularly play The Crew. And why that is so important is that in the month of April in 2024, Ubisoft announced that they were closing The Crew entirely, which would mean that anyone who owned The Crew, be it on PC, be it on console, be it on a disc, if you purchased a disc on any of your consoles of choice, none of those discs would ever work again. And so this sparked a lot of controversy on the consumer, because of course, if you make a purchase, it should be yours forever. And this has also steamrolled into a much larger much larger sense of urgency, and has put a video game YouTuber called Ross Scott. He's the Accursed Games YouTuber, and he has now formed the largest campaign ever to try and stop publishers from destroying video games. And so, just to give you a quick idea, we'll get into more information. We'll also talk about our opinions about it as well. Sure. But this man is going and he is trying to initiate laws that are already in government discourse already, to preserve art. And the argument is that video games are art, and if they are not themselves art, they at least encompass art within it, including music, including visual aesthetics. You can also say that coding is art as well. And so, because art has to be preserved, video games would also have to be preserved. And video games have always been preserved. You could play a video game. I could grab my Atari right now and play a game from 40 years ago. But there are games that have come out in the last 10 years that are no longer accessible. That includes all the video games on Wii U and 3DS that are no longer accessible and can no longer be purchased. So if there's any online features in that game is no longer accessible to play. They just recently also closed down their digital platform on 3DS and Wii U that had 1,000 digital-only video games not released on other consoles. So there's over 1,000 digital games that, if their developers don't make the effort to release it elsewhere, are now just gone from the history of video games. 50 years from now, those video games will essentially be a footnote as something that is no longer preserved and no longer playable. So why are we talking about this? Because they're actively trying to get you consumers at home to try and bring in petitions to your government. So if you are in Canada, UK, or Australia, there is a website that Mr. Ross Scott created called Stop Killing Games Initiative. That is stopkillinggames.com, where you can get all of your resources, and so that you yourself can go and try and influence government entities right now to have the discussions about video games being art. And these aren't petitions just like petitions where you 50,000 people show it and then you hope that they have the goodwill enough to start having those discussions. These are petitions that if there is enough signings, then the government has no choice but to have a response to that petition. And so he is only one man, and with a small team with no backing, has gone and decided to try and preserve the history of video games. So Chugs.
Yeah.
I assume I already know your take on this.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
you must be like me, and I think this is pretty egregious of a practice, I think.
I think it is so incredibly important, especially with, like, video games are such a young art form when you really look at it. Like again, most historians consider Tennis for Two by William Hickenbotham as the first true video game. That was released October 18th, 1958. Mm-hmm. We are like 65 years. This year will be 66 years since video games have started. And to see, like, the incredible progress that the art form has made in such a short time, it is a travesty, an absolute travesty at the idea that some of these incredible pieces of art, because that's what I think you would agree we could call them.
Absolutely.
To think these pieces of art could disappear forever makes me so sad. It really, really does. I completely understand. And when I say game preservation, I'm not saying people, like, making copies of current games now and, you downloading them for free on the internet. I'm not saying anything like that. But as far as, like, old games that stand the test of time and that deserve to be appreciated for what they did, what they've done, the stories they tell, the music, all that stuff, I feel like these should be able to stay for generations to come. So I am so on board with the idea of us treating video game preservation very, very seriously, because there are some absolutely incredible video games that it makes me so sad to imagine them not being kept around forever. Like I am so for it. So for it.
And this is a stat that I'm pulling from a July 2023 report by the Video Game History Foundation. They found that only 13% of video games released before the year 2010 are still commercially available. So that means that you could purchase anywhere, which means there is a good percent, almost 90% of video games are just not attainable anymore. It cannot be purchased, and that's physical games. That's not even discussing the games that are digital only, which is the practices that are currently going on. So that's on par to give you an idea of how little has been preserved. That's on par with pre-World War II audio recordings, with only 10% of the recordings still available, and silent films, where 14% of those films are still available. So there is so much art out there that is gone. Yeah. It is already gone. And so what really sparks this with The Crew is that The Crew is the first time there's such a large pool that they can actually make a class action lawsuit and have that discussion, not only in America but in these other countries. So if this is something that you are interested in, you the listener, so please go to stopkillinggames.com and look at how you can influence this, because I personally think it's a practice that is wrong. I always questioned why, give you an example, and this is only one I remember off the top of my head. But if you purchased a disc of Overwatch, when you play that game, it is online only. So now that Overwatch 2 came out, they removed Overwatch 1 entirely. So your purchase was an $80 game, but that $80 game only gave you the rights to play it for 7 years. Which is kind of an insane statistic, and you don't know what games that's going to happen to. Like Elden Ring will probably be available for a very long time because it can be played without, without the online features of it. But a game that is purely online will not have a server forever. But something like Ultima, that was created on the internet 40 years ago, still is being distributed, still is being supported. So a lot of it goes on the publishers, and a lot of it goes on, the companies behind the video games deciding that this is how, by removing them, it is less cost efficient. And of course, that is the case for sure. But there has to be a way to have a middle ground as to how we could still be playing these games, or at least have the source code available so that these games can live on, Museums down the line will want to have a Last of Us copy, will want to have, a Super Mario copy, and those games will probably be safe. But there is a ton of video games being created every single day. There's 20, 30 games that get released every single day. And it is very likely that 10 years from now, 90% of those games are disappeared, never to be seen again. So it's I wouldn't say it's an urgent issue. I know there are more urgent issues in the world right now, for sure. But if you want to influence something and you want to do good in the world of video game, this is your chance.
And I do think it's really important because, again, I know that every game is different. But, like, the idea of 50 years from now, like, us talking about Super Mario Bros. And not being able to play it, I know that's a horrible example because that game will obviously last forever. But there are just so many super important video games within the world that I feel like generations to come should be able to experience, or at least discuss, or like you said, even see the source code. Mm-hmm. So I think saving all the hard work that so many of these devs and just so many amazing memories so many gamers have had, I think it's so important to preserve as many of these games as humanly possible, because it is sad to think that a lot of them will not stand the test of time.
And this goes beyond even for us. It's already tough to be a person who makes video games. If you are a developer at video games, we thank you. And also, it is such a volatile place. Like, you make a video games, and a lot of times by the time you made that video game, you are no longer working for that company because they have now reached that point, and they absolve you of that company. And so there's not a lot of job security when you're creating these video games. And so beyond that, it's hard for even you getting recognition for your little part in the video game. If that video game has a 6-year lifespan and then disappears forever on top of that, it will only eventually, I think, influence people who want to perform their art, who want to make video games, to not make video games, you know? And that's, I don't think that's an extreme take. I think people will always want to make video games, but the world of video game making is already so cruel to its workers. This is just like an extra layer on top of it.
Right. 100%.
So yeah, if you want to influence that, that is stopkillinggames.com. YouTuber Ross Scott is doing this all on his own. He is not a entity. He's not even a company. He's doing a lot of work. And he has a video out there if you want to see it as well. Go to his YouTube. His YouTube name is Accursed Games. He also does other content. But yeah, he is currently championing this initiative to try and preserve as many video games as humanly possible and make it law as well in multiple countries. And we tip our hats at you.
100%. Yes. What an amazing idea. Amazing idea.
So yes, please do your part. That'll be it for this week's episode of All Elite Arcade. We appreciate you all for coming in this week. You know, the Chugs, where can we find you?
Yes. So once again, I stream on Twitch. I try to do it between 5 and 6 days a week. It depends on my schedule, but you can find me at twitch.tv/thechugs, playing a bunch of different games on there, whether it's The Witcher 3, FF16 DLC, Dark Souls 2, Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown, Silent Hill. We play a bunch of different stuff on there, but most importantly, we celebrate the amazing art form that is video games. So once again, that is twitch.tv/thechugs.
If you are a YouTuber or a YouTube watcher, our content is at youtube.com/aewgames. If you're on our podcast, you can find us on all podcasting platforms. Just search for All Elite Arcade. You can also watch the video on YouTube, and you can also listen to the audio. Cross-pollinate if you would like. We would greatly appreciate that. You can also find AW Games on all social media platforms except Instagram. That is Play AW Games. Find me, Evil Uno, everywhere at Evil Uno, including twitch.tv/Evil Uno. In the next week, we will be having our next pro wrestling event live on Twitch. It's free, May 12th, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Come and join us for Mystery Wrestling. Hey, Chugs, thank you so much. Another week where we talked a bunch of great video games.
Oh, yes, we did. And many more weeks to come.
That's right. See you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.